Hello everyone, and welcome to the Biblical Bookworm. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm very happy to see you again. In today's video, I'd like to talk about fun in the Christian life. You know, it seems as if this aspect of Christianity is often overlooked both by people inside and outside of this religion. Sometimes people think that Christianity is all about a set of rules and that the less fun you have, the better. Far from it. In this video, I'd like to talk about how fun belongs in a Christian life. In order to do this, I'll summarize a video that was originally in German, so this content has not been available in English yet. The link to the original video will be in the description, so all credit goes to Dr. Johannes Hartl, who is a philosopher and Catholic theologian from Germany, who made that original video. He starts off by explaining that there are some things that we're responsible for and other things we're not responsible for. For example, it's obvious that we have to brush our teeth ourselves, and that's our responsibility. No one has ever had the idea to pray to the Holy Ghost to brush their teeth. An aspect that we often overlook, which we're also responsible for ourselves, is our personal well-being. For example, we say, I'm stressed out because of my boss, or I'm sad because there's no one here to console me. So we pretend like the responsibility for our own well-being isn't ours. Dr. Hartl quotes Proverbs 4:23, where it says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." This shows that how we feel on the inside radiates to the outside. So if we're miserable ourselves, we can't treat others well. Dr. Hartl says that we can't treat others better than ourselves. Then he defines love, and he says that it's listening to someone and being there for them. And in combination with the commandment to love our neighbor as ourselves, he deduces that self-love means listening to yourself and being there for yourself. He suggests that we ask ourselves a very interesting question, namely, if we were a father and at the same time the child of that father, would be a good father, or would we say that the way we treat ourselves is child abuse? Dr. Hartl pointed out that many Christians believe that God doesn't really care how we're doing because the only thing he cares for is if we keep the commandments. But that's a false picture of God because he treats us better than we treat ourselves. We have to remember that Jesus came so that we may have life and have it in abundance. It's worth remembering what Jesus' first miracle was. His first miracle was at a party, namely the wedding feast in Cana, where people ran out of wine and Jesus gave them more wine. Or let's keep in mind that God rested on the seventh day of creation, not because he needed rest, he just rested. Another story that shows that God doesn't have a problem with pleasure is the story where a woman came to him in Bethany and poured a very expensive ointment on his head. In that story, the disciples were upset about this waste, but the person who wasn't upset about that waste was Jesus. To recapitulate what we have so far, we are commanded to love our neighbor as ourselves. Loving means to care for the other and being there for the other. And in conclusion, it follows that we're called or even commanded to listen to ourselves and be there for ourselves. I'd like to read some passages from a very interesting letter now. Sometime during the 12th century, Saint Bernard of Clairvaux wrote a letter, or rather a book, to Pope Eugene III about how concerned he was that the Pope overworked himself. Both were Cistercian monks, and before Pope Eugene became Pope, he was a student of Saint Bernard. So in this context, it makes sense why Saint Bernard wrote such a letter to the Pope. With what therefore had I best begin? Doubtless with thy occupations, because it is especially with regard to them that I condole with thee. Little by little mayest thou proceed to hardness of heart, and from that to a loathing of virtue. And in this way, as I have said, a continuous pain will soon find relief, either in a complete cure or in utter insensibility. If thou devotest to external activities all thy time and all thy attention, reserving nothing for consideration, what shall I say to thee? Do I praise thee? In this I praise thee not. Neither, as I suppose, would anyone else who remember the words of Solomon, he that is less in action shall receive wisdom. Even for action itself, it is expedient that it should follow, not precede, consideration. Again, if thou desirest to put thyself unreservedly at the disposal of all, after the example of him who became all things to all men, I certainly applaud thy charity, provided only that it be full. But how can thy charity be full unless thou thyself also art comprehended in its embrace? Thou art a man like the rest of us. Therefore, if thy charity is to be considered full and perfect, it ought to include thee as well as other men in its folds. For in the words of the Lord, what will it profit thee to gain the whole world if thou losest thyself alone? Wherefore, since everybody else enjoys a share of thy solicitude, do thou likewise participate therein. How long wilt thou refuse to admit thyself also in thy turn amongst the multitude of men to whom thy door stands open? Remember, therefore, I do not say always, I do not even say often, but at least from time to time to restore thyself to thyself. Now you're probably wondering how exactly to balance caring for yourself with other Christian ideals. So on one hand, you're called to listen to your body, for example, when it comes to food, but on the other hand, overeating is a sin. What Dr. Hartle suggests is that we pay close attention to what our actual desires are. So what's behind the current desire for sweets or alcohol or porn, for example. He explains that if we always indulge in the things listed before, first of all, this only cures the symptoms and not the actual problem or desire. Secondly, we constantly need more of it, and finally, it slowly destroys our life. In order to find out what our actual needs or problems are, we can take a look at the basic human needs. There have been many theories of basic human needs, for example, Maslow's pyramid, so I suggest you just Google basic human needs to familiarize yourself with those lists. And then when you crave alcohol, for example, you ask yourself, what are you actually desiring? What are you trying to satisfy by consuming alcohol? For example, the underlying sensation might be sadness. Then do something to address that sadness. Maybe meet friends, talk to someone you love and trust, or go for a walk in nature, or maybe speak to God in prayer about it. But don't just numb the pain with alcohol. Or if the underlying problem is loneliness, then find a way to actually solve that problem instead of just treating the symptoms. Of course, it's important to remember that sometimes our desire, for example, for food is just that, a desire for food, and we need to eat. But it's worth taking a look inside and asking ourselves a question. What are my actual feelings, and what do I actually need right now? Also, sometimes you have to say no to your basic needs, like for example, when someone wants to eat meat on Good Friday. But usually, as a general rule, there is a way to listen to yourself without overindulging. Or as St. John Bosco said, one can have much fun without offending God. Just to give you some examples of what caring for yourself can look like. Get enough sleep, don't forget to rest. Go offline sometimes, for example, on an offline retreat or the like. Go on a walk in nature. Intentionally spend time alone as well as with people. Exercise regularly. Take time for prayer and, for example, go to daily mass as often as possible without neglecting your daily duties, of course. Or another set of ideas would be to treat yourself with the same respect as you treat others. Unfortunately, that's not that common and obvious as it might sound. For example, don't just clean your apartment when someone comes to visit, but clean it out of respect for yourself. Dress nicely even when you don't expect to meet anyone on that day. Or cook a healthy meal just for yourself, even if you feel like all the work of cutting all those vegetables isn't worth it. Remember, you're worth it. That's been it for today. I hope this video was helpful to you. See you soon, God bless, and bye!